Hi there, this is Tom Tullis. I'm one of the co-authors of the book Measuring the User Experience, and this is going to be a short video about using pivot tables in Excel to calculate means and confidence intervals for some of the data from a usability study. The study that we're going to look at is a study I did several years ago comparing the NASA and Wikipedia sites specifically about the Apollo space program. And it looks like we got data from 117 people. This was an online study. They were randomly assigned to either the Wikipedia site or the NASA site, and they did the same tasks regardless of which site they were on. And the data that you see here is their average task time in minutes, their average task ease rating, which was on a 1 to 5 scale, and their accuracy in terms of what percentage of their tasks they got right. So let's say, for example, that we wanted to calculate the average task time for the Wikipedia site in comparison to the NASA site, and then also to be able to show a confidence interval for that mean. So a way that you can do that is using a pivot table. So I'm going to select those two columns because those are the ones that I'm interested in. Go up here to Insert Pivot Table. By the way, this is Excel 2016, I believe, that I'm using. All of these defaults are fine. It's going to create the pivot table in a new worksheet. So what I have now is a blank pivot table over here on the left, and on the right are the different fields that I can use to populate that pivot table. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag website down into rows. You'll notice that NASA and Wikipedia showed up there. Those are the two data values that exist in that website column. Blank is here too. There's actually not any blank entries. So I'm actually just going to get rid of that by clicking here and unchecking blank. Now I need to get the time into the pivot table, so I'm going to drag it down to this sum values area. And now it showed up here as another column in the pivot table. And you'll notice that it's initially defaulted to the sum of the task time, but that's not what I want. So instead I'm going to right click on it and choose Summarize Values by Average. And so now I've got the average time for the NASA site and the Wikipedia site. Looks like people were taking longer on the NASA site. But now what I want to do is to be able to calculate a confidence interval for this mean. Now, in order to calculate a confidence interval, I need to know two things. I need to know the standard deviation of this data that went into this mean, and I need to know the count, how many of those things there are that went into that mean. So the way I can do that is by dragging task time down in there, the same place again. So I get another column, again initially showing the sum of the task time, but I'm going to right click and choose Value Field Settings, which gives me a full list of all of the things that I can change that to. And I want to change it to the standard deviation. So now I've got the standard deviation. The only thing that I'm still need is the count, how many of those things there were. So again, I drag task time into that same area. Again, it defaults initially to the sum of the task time, but I right click and I can change that to Summarize Values by Count. And now I've got my count. So what I'm going to do for purposes of calculating the confidence interval and for then graphing, I'm going to start another table down here. So first I'm going to do the labels. So just clicking on that. And now I'll just copy that down. I get the other one. And if I just copy it over to the right, I've now got the averages as well, the means. I'm going to round that down so it's not such a ridiculous looking number. Now I'm going to calculate the confidence interval on that mean by using equals confidence. Just plain confidence is fine. First thing it's asking for is the alpha. Now the alpha is going to be 100 minus whatever confidence interval I'm trying to get. So with a 90% confidence interval, that's 100 minus 90, or 10, or 0.1 actually, since we're dealing with essentially percentages. So the alpha that I want is 0.1. If I had wanted a 95% confidence interval, then it would have been a 0.05. Comma. Now it's asking for the standard deviation. That's what I've got right up here. It turns out you can't actually just click on it though, so you have to type the cell reference. So C4, comma, the last thing it wants is the size or the count, and that's what I have up here in D4. And again, I need to type that, so D4 and close parenthesis. And there's my confidence interval for this mean, and now I just copy that down and I've got the other confidence interval. So now I've got what I need to make my graph. So I'm going to select those and insert a column chart, and here is my chart. And now I want to add, and so it looks like, the NASA one was taking longer. But I don't really know how significant this difference is. So I want to put error bars on here that represent these confidence intervals. So I go over here to this plus, and you'll notice that error bars is one of the options. Click on the little arrow to the right and then choose more options. I get this format thing. Choose custom. Choose specify value. Now it's asking me for the positive error value and the negative error value. Well, I want for both of those entries, I'm going to use these two confidence intervals, because a confidence interval needs to be both added to the mean as well as subtracted from it. So to get my first one for positive, I select those. And now for negative, I just do exactly the same thing, selecting those two. And I OK that, and there are my error bars. It turns out they actually barely overlap. In reality, I should do a t-test to see if these two are statistically significant different from each other. I have actually already done that. I know they are significantly different. But having the error bars here, the confidence intervals, 90% confidence interval, is a good visual way of being able to tell what's going on. So I hope that was helpful.